Hello everyone, welcome back to RS Academy. So today we will be seeing the question and answer section for breathing and exchange of gases. In this session, I have included previous year NEET questions along with some questions that I have prepared on my own. So come, let's get started. The first question is, lungs are enclosed in periosteum, perichondrium, pericardium and pleural membrane. So keep guessing the answers, don't wait for my answers too, okay? Now, we all know that lungs are enclosed in double layer pleural membrane, right? What are the two layers? One is outer and another one is inner. So outer layer is called as parietal pleura and inner layer is called as visceral pleura. Okay? So this is the answer for first question. Pleural membrane. Skin is an accessory organ of respiration in frog because the frog has to breathe through their skin when it is under it water. What is the next question? Select the correct events that occur during the inspiration. So, what are all the events that will occur during the inspiration? Diaphragm will contract. Right? Is that there in the option? Yes. So, first option. So, what are all the options that is having 1A and C? Okay. Now, what is the second option? Contraction of external intercostal muscles. Will that happen? Yes. So, 1 and 2. There is another option 1 and 2 along with 4. So let us check the fourth option. What is that? Intrapulmonary pressure increases. So during inspiration, intrapulmonary pressure should be low than the atmospheric pressure so that only the air from the atmosphere will enter into the lungs. So which option is correct? Option A. Okay, now let's move on to the fourth question. Tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume of an athlete is 500 ml and 1000 ml respectively. What will be his expiratory capacity if the residual volume is 1200 ml? So now we have to find the expiratory capacity of the athlete, right? So what is the formula to find the expiratory capacity, tidal volume along with the expiratory reserve volume? So what is the expiratory reserve volume here? That is 1000. And what is the tidal volume here? 500. So if you add both of these, what is the answer that we'll be getting? 1500 ml. So which option is correct? Option B. And next question. Select the correct statement. Okay. So just listen to the statement that I'm going to read. Expiration occurs due to the external intercostal muscles. Intrapulmonary pressure is lower than the atmospheric pressure during the inspiration. And inspiration occurs when atmospheric pressure is less than intrapulmonary pressure. And expiration is initiated due to the contraction of diaphragm. Which of these is correct? I have explained above, right? The atmospheric pressure should be higher than the intrapulmonary pressure. So which option is correct? Option B. Intrapulmonary pressure is lower than the atmospheric pressure during inspiration. Let's move on to the sixth question. Match the items given in column 1 and with those in column 2 and select the correct option given below. Okay? In column 1, what are all the things that they have given? Tidal volume, inspirated reserve volume, expirated reserve volume, residual volume. If you have studied the values of each volume, it will be very easy. Okay. So, what is the value of tidal volume basically? It will be around 500. So, when you see the 500, the first thing that you have to do is match A to the option 3. Okay. Now, option 3 is gone. Now, inspiratory reserve volume. What is the value of inspiratory reserve volume? That is 2500 to 3000 ml. So, first option is gone. 1 and 3 is gone. Now, check the option. There is two options with 3 in the first question, only one option with 1 in the second question. So 6B is the answer. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Lungs are made up of half-filled sacs called alveoli. They do not collapse even after forceful expiration because residual volume exists. Residual volume will have some amount of air inside our lungs even after the forceful expiration or even after normal expiration. Okay. Now, what is the eighth question? Lungs do not collapse between breath, and some air always remains in the lungs, which can never be expelled. Why? Why? Because intrapleural pressure is the pressure of the air that is present inside the pleural cavity. So, intrapleural pressure is always negative, which acts like a suction to keep the lungs inflated and prevent them from collapsing. So, there is a negative intrapleural pressure pulling at the lung walls. Which of the following is not a part of conducting zone? Which of the part is not the part of conducting zone? We all know that respiratory system is divided into two parts. One is conducting and another one is exchange part. Right? Exchange part involves, what are all those? Exchange part involves alveoli and its ducts. Okay? Conducting part involves nostrils, nasal chamber, and pharynx, trachea, and then bronchi and bronchioles. Okay, all of these are conducting part and these are exchange part. So, which is not the part of conducting part in these options? Alveoli. Okay, let's see 10th question here. Which of the following is a possibility for most of us in regard to breathing by making a conscious effort? So, one can breathe out air through mutation tube by closing both the mouth and nose. So this is a conscious effort that we make and we can breathe through mutation tube. Okay. Listed below are 4 respiratory capacities and 4 jumbled respiratory volumes of a normal healthy adult. We actually know the value of inspiratory reserve volume and residual volume, right? What is the value of inspiratory reserve volume? That is 2500 to 3000. And what is the value of residual volume? The value of residual volume is around 1100 to 1200, right? So 1 is 1200 and 3 is 2500. And inspiratory reserve volume along with the tidal volume, we will be getting the inspiratory capacity. And vital capacity is nothing but IRV along with TV and ERV gives us the vital capacity, right? So now the value of vital capacity is 4500 and inspiratory capacity is what? 3500 ml. Okay. So now let us look on to the maths. 1 should have 1200 and 4 should have 3500. Now the option is C. In option A, they have given 2500 ml and third one is paired with 4500 ml. What is second and third? Their vital capacity and expiratory reserve volume. None of them is correct. So it is not option A. And then let's see option B. Option B is third one should be paired with 1200 and fourth one should be paired with 2500. Okay. Now none of them is correct. Let's move on to option C. Fourth should be paired with 3500 and first should be paired with 1200. So this is the correct option. Let's check the last option also. Last option has residual volume and vital capacity. What is the residual volume that we have obtained? 1200, but they have mentioned 4500 here. And what is the vital capacity that we have obtained? 4,500, but here it is 3,500. So on the whole, the option which is correct is option C. What is vital capacity of our lungs? So vital capacity is the amount of air which one can inhale or exhale with maximum effort. Okay, this is called as vital capacity, right? IRV, ERV along with the tidal volume makes the vital capacity, right? Now there is another formula for vital capacity, that is nothing but total lung capacity is calculated by vital capacity along with the residual volume, right? So if we need vital capacity, we have to minus the residual volume with total lung capacity. Okay? Is there any answer like this? Yes. Total lung capacity minus residual volume. So this is the answer for 12th question. Which one of the following statement is incorrect? The principle of countercurrent flow facilitates efficient respiration in gills of fish. The residual air in the lungs slightly decreases the efficiency of the respiration in mammals. And the presence of non-respiratory air sacs increase the efficiency of respiration in birds. In insects, circulating body fluids serve to distribute the oxygen to tissues. So, which of them is wrong here? B. So, why B? The residual air in the lungs slightly decreases the efficiency of respiration in mammals. No, the residual amount of air present in the lungs actually increases the efficiency of the respiration in the mammals. Okay. Now, when 1500 ml air is in the lungs, it is called as residual volume. Okay. The ventilation movements of the lungs in mammals are governed by diaphragm and intercostal muscles. And diaphragms are getting contracted, and due to this contraction, volume of thorax increases. When the thoracic cavity volume increases, there will be increase in the lung volume. And when there is increase in the lung volume, lung pressure will be low and atmospheric pressure will be high. And now the air enters into the lungs. And when external intercostal muscle gets contracted, what it will happen? It will move the ribs upward and outward, and it will move sternum forward. Okay, so diaphragm and intercostal muscles are governing the ventilation movement of the lungs. Okay, now in 16th question, in mammal and in man, air passes from the outside into the lungs through, they are asking the passage of air passing from the atmosphere to the lungs. So we definitely know the answer for this question, and this is the very easiest question. Okay, the first thing is nasal cavity, and from nasal cavity it passes to pharynx, not larynx, then to pharynx, and then pharynx to trachea through larynx. Okay, so now on we will be considering these two options. And now let us look on to the third option. And from pharynx, the air will reach trachea through larynx, and then it will reach bronchi and not bronchioles. So this option is not right. And let's take another option. Pharynx to trachea through larynx, and then to bronchi and bronchioles to alveoli. Is this option correct? Yes. So 16D is the answer. And then 17th question. Partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide at alveoli are. So if you have studied the table, you must know the answer for this question. Okay. So the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide at alveoli is 1 at 4 and 40. Why? Because oxygen will be high in the alveoli and carbon dioxide will be less in the alveoli, and only when the deoxygenated blood enters the alveoli, the oxygen concentration will be reduced and carbon dioxide concentration will be increased. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What is the next question? Partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli of the lungs is PO2 in the lungs is equal to that in the blood, more than that in the blood, less than that in the blood, less than that of the carbon dioxide. So the option B is correct because I have told you about, right, oxygen concentration in the alveoli is high. If the oxygen is high, and of course partial pressure of the oxygen in the alveoli will also be high, and PO2 of blood will be low, and that is how the diffusion from alveoli to blood happens. If you look at this diagram, this part is called as basement membrane, and this is called as endothelium, and the cells which is present inside is called as red blood cells, and this layer is called as squamous epithelium, and this is alveolar wall. Okay, and this is the place where air enters in. Yes, here is the 19th question. Now here let us see the age parts. As we have recalled before, we know what is D. What is D? D is nothing but basement membrane. Basement membrane is nothing but the thin capillary wall, and that is why they have said capillary wall here. And then comes this part. What is this? RBC. And what is this? Alveolar cavity. And what is C? Arterial capillary. Arterial capillary passes the oxygen to the tissues. Alveolar cavity, main site of exchange of respiratory gases. And capillary wall, exchange of O2 and CO2, red blood cells transport CO2 mainly. So what's the correct function identified? B. Alveolar cavity, main site of exchange of respiratory gases. Let's see 20th question. The exchange of gases in the alveoli of the lungs takes place by simple diffusion. Expiration and inspiration are active and passive transport, and the gases in the alveoli of the lungs will exchange by the process called simple diffusion. Now let us see the 21st question, okay? So in lungs, the air is separated from the venous blood through squamous epithelium and endothelium of the blood vessel. As a result, the barrier between the air in an alveolus and the blood in the capillaries is only about 0.5 mm. So what is the answer? Option B. Squamous epithelium plus endothelium of the blood vessel. So the alveolar epithelium in the lungs is, the alveoli have a very thin, that is up to 0.001 mm thick. Okay, so that wall is composed of a simple, moist, non-ciliated, squamous epithelium. The number of alveoli is countless, and the surface area is enormous. As we all know, alveoli has huge surface area, thin membrane, and that is how the efficiency of gas exchange happens. So this further accelerates for gaseous exchange in the alveoli. So what is the option that is correct? Non-ciliated squamous epithelium. Select the favorable condition required for the formation of oxyhemoglobin at the alveoli. So what is the favorable condition here? Now in the alveoli, PO2 should be high. With high, there are two options. And then CO2 concentration should be less, and hydrogen concentration should also be less, and the temperature should be low. Now let us see 24th question. Identify wrong statement with reference to the transport of oxygen. So let us read each and every statement and identify which is the wrong statement. Even if you are able to find the correct statement, it is fine. It will be very helpful to find the wrong statement. Okay. So what is the first option? Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is mainly related to the partial pressure of O2. Is it right? Yes. Because with high PO2 and lower concentration of CO2 and lower hydrogen ion and lower temperature, the favorable condition for binding oxygen with hemoglobin. The partial pressure of CO2 can interfere with O2 binding with hemoglobin. The statement is right because CO2 should be low. And let us move on to the next state. Higher hydrogen concentration in alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Is it right? Let's see the next option. Low PCO2 in alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Of course, I have told you, right? Low PCO2 in the alveoli will be the favorable condition for the formation of oxyhemoglobin. So, which statement is wrong here? Option C. In 25th question, they are asking us what will happen if there is reduction in the pH of blood. Okay, when there is reduction in the pH of blood, oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve will shift to right. So that indicates the dissociation of oxygen from the hemoglobin. So this decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. So I've already told you the answer. The answer is decrease affinity of hemoglobin with oxygen. Now 26th question. Approximately 70% of carbon dioxide absorbed by the blood will be transported to the lungs as bicarbonate ions in the form of dissolved gas molecules by binding to RBC and carbaminohemoglobin. So, which is the right answer? As bicarbonate ions. A large proportion of oxygen remains unused in human blood even after its uptake by the body tissues. So, this CO2 will act as the reserve during the muscle exercise. Okay, rice is the episode of blood to 70 mmHg. It is not. Is enough to keep oxyhemoglobin saturation at 95? No. Helps in releasing more O2 to the epithelial tissues? No. Now let's look at the 28th question. So here they have asked hemoglobin is a type of what? So we already know that Hb helps in oxygen transportation to tissues, right? So due to this activity, the hemoglobin is a type of respiratory pigment. Okay, and also hemoglobin is responsible for the iron content as well as the red pigment. Then how the transport of O2 and CO2 by blood happens. So how does it happen? Through RBCs and blood plasma, the transport of O2 and CO2 by blood happens. Usually, carbon dioxide, that is CO2, is carried by blood in three forms, that is physical solution and bicarbonate ions, okay, and carbaminohemoglobin, okay. And a very small amount of carbon dioxide dissolves in the plasma and is carried as the physical solution. About 70% of the carbon dioxide released by the respiring tissue cells diffuses into the plasma and then into the erythrocytes. So here CO2 combines with water to form what? Carbonic acid. So carbonic acid dissociates into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. Okay, so by this, would you understand the answer is plasma and erythrocyte, because a very small amount of carbon dioxide dissolves in the plasma and it is carrying the physical solution. And also 70% of the carbon dioxide released by the respiring tissue cells diffuses into the plasma and then into the erythrocytes. So now this involves plasma and erythrocytes. Then when you hold your breathing, which of the following gases in the blood would first lead to urge to breathe? Okay, when there is rise in CO2 concentration, there will be urge to breathe, because I have already told you in the previous part that the breathing mainly depends on CO2 concentration and not O2 concentration. So it is called as chemical regulation of respiration. Next 32nd question. The respiratory centers which controls inspiration and expiration are located in medulla oblongata. Which of the following is an occupational respiratory disorder? Among this, silicosis is the occupational respiratory disorder because the workers who are working in the mining industry who inhale the silica continuously, they will be affected by silicosis. Okay. Name the chronic respiratory disorder caused mainly by cigarette smoking. What is that? Emphysema. And next, The thin cartilaginous flap which prevents the food entry into the larynx is called as epiglottis. Opening of larynx is called as glottis, and the thin cartilaginous flap which prevents the opening of larynx is called as epiglottis. And then oxygen dissociation curve is sigmoid because of cooperative binding of oxygen, because when one oxygen gets binded with the hemoglobin, then other binding of oxygen molecules becomes easier. So with this, we will be completing the Q&A session of this chapter. And in the next video, we will be seeing about body fluids and its circulation. So stay tuned and please do subscribe and support my channel.